friend. You're listening to The Sustainable Bodyworker, the podcast for massage therapists who want to grow thriving, purpose-led businesses without the burnout. Here we talk about nervous system aligned business strategy, pricing that makes sense, client work that doesn't deplete you, and how to build a career that actually supports your life. I'm your host, Gretchen Popp, massage therapist, mentor, educator, and recovering overachiever. Let's get into it. Hey friends, welcome back to the Sustainable Bodyworker podcast. Before we dive into this episode, I want to say if you're new here, this episode is kind of the tail end of a whole series I've been doing on becoming an employer in the massage therapy world. That series started back at episode 41, and if hiring is something that's been on your mind, or if you're already an employer and want to clean things up, there's a whole lot of value in those previous episodes for you. We've talked about readiness, leadership, culture, communication, systems, all of it. So if this conversation hits home for you, definitely go back and listen to those too. And today's conversation is such an important one to wrap this series with because we are talking about something that gets people really fired up in this profession and also something that can create a lot of harm when it's not understood clearly. I've always been a big advocate for hiring W-2 when that is what the relationship actually is, because I think a lot of massage therapists have ended up being misclassified and it leaves them underprotected or confused about what they're truly responsible for and carrying burdens that they shouldn't be carrying. And on the business owner side, this isn't some tiny paperwork issue either. Getting this wrong can create real consequences, real stress, and real financial risk. And this is why I wanted to bring Julie Campbell onto the podcast for this conversation. Julie is the founder of the Aligned Practice. She started out as a massage therapist herself, built a practice from scratch, eventually grew it into a successful studio with a full team, and after selling that practice, she went on to coach other wellness providers on building more sustainable businesses. She's kind of like my twin in this realm. I love it. Her work now brings together firsthand experience in the treatment room, studio ownership, business coaching, and a background in systems, strategy, and tech. She also recently wrote a blog post called IC or W-2 for massage therapists, where she gets into why this debate gets so messy in our industry, why the answer is not as black and white as people make it sound on Facebook, and why the real issue usually comes down to whether the structure actually matches the reality of the working relationship. She also shares that even when she believed she had a contractor relationship set up correctly, she still ended up getting a bill in the mail for back taxes and unemployment contributions after that contractor filed for unemployment. So this episode is not about demonizing independent contractor arrangements, and it's not about pretending W-2 is the right answer for every single scenario. It's about understanding the difference, understanding the risk, and understanding how to do this right. Because if you're bringing people into your business, I want you to do that from an informed place, not just by copying what everybody else around you seems to be doing. So with that, let's get into this conversation with Julie. Alrighty, Julie, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so grateful to connect with you on such an important conversation. So I have been waiting for this drum roll, please. But before we get into it, will you please briefly introduce yourself for anyone who is not familiar with you and give us a little summary as to what it is you help massage therapists with?
Absolutely. And thank you for having me. I am also very excited to discuss this lovely topic. I'm Julie Campbell. I own the Aligned Practice, which is a coaching slash educational business for massage therapists and other wellness providers just to get the help they need to succeed in the business world.
Amazing. Awesome. How long have you been doing that?
I have been doing it since about 2013, so a really long time. Yeah, and I
Awesome.
love it. It's one of my favorite things to do. It's very fulfilling. Having been a former business owner, massage therapist, I know how it goes and how hard it is for us sometimes. And I really just have a passion for the work.
Yeah. Yeah. And that shows through your Instagram as well, which is what originally allowed me to connect with you. And specifically, you shared a blog post or a post referring to a blog post that initially sparked my interest in chatting with you on whether or not to hire massage therapists as independent contractors or W-2 employees. And I'm curious, what made you want to write this post? And why do you think that the IC versus W2 conversation gets so heated in the massage industry specifically?
I wanted to write the post because it's something that's on my mind a lot. I am in a lot of massage therapy forums on Facebook, and it's a topic that just comes up on repeat, and that I, to be honest with you, typically stay out of because of how charged it gets in the comments. But like I said, I owned a business for a decade, a massage and acupuncture studio where I had quite a few massage therapists and acupuncturists who worked for me. And I had a little bit of everything. I had renters, I had independent contractors, and I had employees at all different times and even all at the same time. So I have experience with all of those. And before that, being all of those as well on the other side of it. So I just learned so much from those experiences. And I think there's a lot of misinformation out there in our field. And if the only place you're learning about these topics is on the forums, which is where I think we tend to get a lot of our information as new business owners in particular, that you could be led down some wrong paths and make decisions that aren't exactly right for you. So that inspired me to finally publicly weigh in on the conversation in via my blog post and my social media posts, and in just hopes that it would help people have a little bit of a different viewpoint.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and a more well-rounded viewpoint. I really appreciated your blog post because, like you said, those forums, I mean, it can be great for certain information, right? Where, I'm struggling with this client interaction. How do I manage this? And sometimes you can get a lot of information there. But when it comes to legal things, and if you're in the United States, there's so many different laws, there's so many different regulations, and that's just not the best place to be getting advice. But then at the same time, too, a new business owner doesn't necessarily have all of this money to drop on an employment attorney or a
Right.
business coach, right? So this information does need to be shared. And I'm really grateful that we're having this conversation so that, more people can benefit from this free resource. We'll also link to your blog post for anyone who really wants to get into the nitty gritty beyond this conversation. And one particular thing that I appreciated about your post is that you didn't say that independent contractor is always wrong or W 2 is always right. So, can you start by explaining why this conversation is more nuanced than people make it sound online?
Definitely. I think that there are so many factors, and I don't think that, I know that there are so many factors. And even in this conversation, even when you're reading my blog post, my first recommendation is always to know your state laws, understand the federal laws, and get some type of legal weigh in on what the right option is for you if you can, if you're able to do that. Even in most states, now I live in a little bit of a bigger city, so this may not be an option in some more rural areas, but you do have online resources now where, you have free like legal aid or legal clinics at, let's say, law schools and colleges like that, that you could get some of these resources from. They sometimes you have to wait a while to get on the wait list and get your number called, but it's worth it, I think, to get your situation understood. So that's the first thing I'll say. The next piece is that, what's right for you. I think there's just so many little things that play into that. One, it's like, I think this one we even miss just when we think about the next step in our careers, in our businesses, is like, what does it actually look like for you in your ideal world becoming a people manager, sharing your space with someone? I think there are a lot of questions we should be asking ourselves before we make that choice, first off. Now, take that with a grain of salt because I also did not ask myself these questions before I started, right? I learned every single possible thing the hard way and I still survived it. So sometimes that's just how we roll, and I
Yep.
no judgment. But at the same time, if you can, and maybe now if you're starting to embark on this journey and you're listening to this, it's a good time to step back and think, what do I actually want that to look like if it were really going to work for me? How much do I want to have to actually manage another person? How much control do I want to have over that relationship and how they interact with my clients and my space? All of that type of thing is very important to weigh into. Also, financials. What does my financial situation look like? Am I actually pricing my services in a way that I can afford an employee, a contractor, so on and so forth? What do I actually wanna make off of another person? What's my goal here? I think those are some things we have to think about in addition to all the laws of our own states and what's even possible there and all of that kind of stuff. So if I go on, the list will be long and I don't want to overwhelm people, but I think there are a lot of little pieces that just apply to your situation alone that no one else can really answer for you generally.
Yeah. Well, I think so much goes into it that is, what you're talking about seems a lot rooted in the business owner's personality, right? Like, how much control do you want to have over that? And, some of us are just like really like, yeah, no, come in, do your thing, just like do your magic stuff and use whatever tools you want. And that's great. And, choose your own hours. Totally. Be really flexible. That's totally fine. The room is available during this time. Come in whenever you want. And
Yeah.
other people like me, I will not deny that I have control issues. I really like to know that I have coverage during these certain times where there has been a high client demand. And I also really like to know that I'm going to have a practitioner not coming in wearing a belly shirt. And I'm going to have someone who isn't using a ton of aromatherapy and giving a very different experience than what my clients are used to experiencing, right? So these two opposite ends of the spectrum do paint a picture. And for you and I who do know the distinction between independent contractor and employee, it's very clear what I need to hire as. And it's very clear what that other practitioner who's like, yeah, do your thing, should hire as. And there is a list on the IRS website that kind of gives this black and white distinction. But there is also sometimes a gray area that a lot of people dance in. They they kind of ride a unicycle down that little line. And I think that really understanding, I love that you are having people consider like what matters to me. Because I think sometimes when we start out hiring our first practitioner, we often think about, well, how am I going to make more money? And how do I reduce expenses? Employees are kind of expensive sometimes, especially if we want to pay them well. We don't always think to add that additional chunk of taxes that the employer is paying. We don't always think about all of the workman's comp policy that we're going to have to be paying into and unemployment and all of that. Employees are generally more expensive. So when it comes to the employer making the most money, as well as the contractor making the most money, the independent contractor position oftentimes looks a lot more appealing to someone who's just starting out on that path. But there
Yeah.
can also be scenarios where it's like that's actually not the best scenario for either party. So, for the therapist or business owner listening who really has only ever heard these strong opinions like this is the only way or you're misclassifying and taking advantage of people in these
Yeah.
Facebook groups or forums, what do you most want them to understand first before they try to figure out what applies to them?
I think the biggest thing probably for them to figure out, again, and I hate to be repetitive here, I do think it is figuring out that control piece and the financial piece. It might boil down to that a lot most often because I think that without understanding where you fit into those 2 camps that the IRS gives you, you're not going to be able to choose the right one. Like you said, I think there are so many gray areas that we land into because of that misunderstanding. I've seen definite misclassifications, people who they just literally have never read those criteria. They just were like, "I'm gonna do this, and that's what I'm doing," and I didn't even look into anything because I didn't even know that I was supposed to or that it was there. Not that they were trying to be malicious or, rob anyone of what's due to them, but they just genuinely didn't understand that there were these rules around it. They've never read them in their life? So I think that's educating yourself, I guess, is probably, like, my big message there is educating yourself about all of these things before you make the decisions and truly understanding what all of those things mean, though it can be difficult sometimes because the IRS doesn't give you those layouts for every single field, and so sometimes that can be a little difficult too. And And just understanding fully what you're willing to do as far as independent contractor and employee go. I think we haven't fully discussed, like, what are the differences, but I think that, that's just a part of it is understanding where you fit into that work realm or those realms.
You know that moment at the end of a session when you're completely drained, when your body feels like it's given everything and you just need something to help you reset? Or maybe it's the end of a long day when you're finally out of the treatment room, but your nervous system is still wired, your muscles are still tight, and you can't quite come down from all that output. I've been there, and for years I've tried everything: stretching, foam rolling, Epsom salt baths, heat packs, all helpful, but nothing really gave me that deep grounding reset I was craving. And then I found the Bond Charge PEMF mat. PEMF stands for Pulsed Electromagnetic Field Therapy. And I know that sounds intense, but stay with me. Basically, it uses the same natural electromagnetic frequencies found in nature, like the Earth's 7.8 Hertz Schumann resonance, to help your body recalibrate at the cellular level. The mat I use is the PEMF Mat Max, and it's honestly become one of the most valuable tools in my self care toolkit. I'm on it every single day. And here's what makes it so incredible: it combines PEMF therapy with infrared heat, red light therapy, and semi precious gemstones like tourmaline, amethyst, and onyx, all layered together to create this deeply restorative experience. You can choose different frequency settings depending on what you need. There's a delta wave setting for deep sleep, an alpha wave setting for calm and relaxation, a beta wave setting for focus and energy, and a grounding setting that mimics the Earth's natural frequency. And the heat is not just surface level heat. It's far infrared, which penetrates deep into your muscles and tissues. It's like the warmth you feel from the sun, but concentrated and therapeutic, kind of like an infrared sauna without all the sweat. I use mine in two main ways. One, after I'm done with clients for the day, I lie on it for 20 minutes with the delta wave setting. It helps my nervous system shift out of work mode and into rest mode. I sleep so much better on the nights that I use it. And two, I actually use it on my massage table as a heated pad for my clients. The gentle warmth and PEMP frequencies add an extra layer of relaxation and recovery to their sessions. Clients have told me they've never felt anything like it, and honestly, it sets my work apart. And here's the thing: this isn't just for body workers. If you're someone who struggles with sleep, stress, muscle tension, or just feeling depleted at the end of the day, this mat can be a total game changer. It's low EMF, flicker free, and completely non invasive. You just lie on it, choose your setting, and let it work. No pills, no appointments, just 20 minutes of deep restorative support for your body and nervous system. So if you've been looking for a way to actually recover, not just survive, head to the link in the show notes and use the code SUSTAINABLE at checkout for 15% off your order. That code again is sustainable. Just for our Sustainable Bodyworker podcast listeners, you get 15% off. Your body works really hard for you and your clients. This is one of the best ways I've found to give back to it. All right, back to the episode. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, moving into the distinction, I think that control really is a big piece of what creates that distinction, right? So, what kinds of control would you say start putting a therapist into employee territory, even if the paperwork might say independent contractor?
Yeah. So the biggest one that comes to my mind, the top 2 that I think I see violated most often are requiring someone to be available at certain times. So you can say this is your availability in the space, right? Like this is when you have the room, but you cannot say you have to be there at these times. So if you've set up your financial situation in a way that you're relying on this independent contractor in order to pay your bills, and they decide on a sunny afternoon that they're just gonna close their schedule off because they don't have any clients, and that's like a repeat thing that they just enjoy doing, you cannot do anything about that because they're an independent contractor and that's their prerogative. They can choose to close their schedule off whenever they feel like it, and it is not your business. Because if you understand the requirements correctly, it's like they have their business within your business. So they're free to operate their own business as just the same way that you're free to operate yours. So that's a big one that I think people misunderstand. They want to bring in an independent contractor and they want to be able to rely on that income. But because of the way an independent contractor is set up, it should really, in my opinion, be considered more along the lines of bonus income, not something that you rely on for paying your bills. That's probably a better way to go when you go with independent contractors. The other one is requiring people to do meetings and things like that. So if you like to have staff meetings and team meetings, you can invite contractors do that. You could even offer to pay them for their time to join you in that, but they can by no means be required to come to a meeting. So I think that's another one that I've seen in the past many times when I've worked with people to get their situation straightened out that I've noticed is a thing that people don't understand. They cannot do that. They can make an agreement with the contractor to meet, but they cannot require them to meet. Yeah.
Yeah. When you said the top 2, there was actually another one that I thought was gonna be one of the top 2, the hours, definitely. The other one that I thought was gonna be listed by you, which I see a lot, is determining what they charge for their services.
That's a good one too.
I see
Yes.
that a lot where they come in and they are charging the rate that the business decides, and then they're just operating with that and under their scheduling system and all of that, and the clients remain the business's clients, and I would love your opinion actually here because this is where I feel like there's a weird gray area. As an independent contractor, if you're accepting clients from the business, wouldn't those clients then become a part of that contractor's business?
Yeah, so how I've operated it in a way that I think aligns with what the IRS wants is so first off, if the independent contractor another thing that I think maybe from the independent contractor side gets mixed up, that I've seen from that side get a little mixed up, is independent contractors are supposed to be marketing themselves.
Yeah.
And bringing in their own clients. Now, that doesn't mean the business can't give clients to the independent contractor, but I think that that relationship should be very clearly defined ahead of time. So the independent contractor needs to be marketing themselves and bring in their own clients, and those clients are their clients. They have every right to take those clients where they want to go. And the business, if they have some arrangement to market for the independent contractor, that needs to be a clear service that they're offering to the contractor for a fee.
Mm.
So, and then in which case, then those are also still the independent contractor's clients. It gets a little more gray and harder to handle when you have existing clientele that then cross over to the independent contractor realm. There are lots of ways that different places that I've seen that aren't massage therapists handle this. It can be like and it depends too. So this is going to be another hot topic probably for a different show, but it depends too. Do you accept are you in a state that considers you a healthcare provider? That those laws are become a bit different because you have to think about referral fees
Mm.
are no when you're a healthcare provider. So that's another whole 'nother thing that probably doesn't fit into this conversation. But if that's not the case where you're at, which it's not in all states, then a lot of times that's what people will do is have some type of referral fee and that's built into the contract and very clearly discussed ahead of time. So that's another way that I've seen that piece being done. So I think it comes down to again, that legal piece, talking to someone who knows the laws in your state, understands how are you considered a healthcare provider and what those laws are that then apply, and helping you figure out what that right arrangement is, or just making it a clear distinction, like your existing clients, you're not trying to refer those people to the independent contractor, and then that just stays in your realm and you keep it clean that way. So it does get a bit complicated, but I think it's doable if you think about it ahead of time and understand your state laws and all of those types of things. You just have to build around that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always said, like, it is possible, it just needs to be done correctly.
Exactly.
Because at the end of the day, too, oftentimes I think independent contractors find those positions appealing
Yes.
because on paper, they're earning more money when, taxes and all of that, is self-employment tax, which is much higher and we have to self-report, but it looks like more money than an employment position. And however, oftentimes when they're misclassified, I find that they are being, I sometimes say taken advantage of. I don't necessarily think it's always intentional, but they're losing out on the opportunity for those write offs.
Right.
So the marketing themselves and the fees that they would charge and the laundry and all of that, while, in a situation where, well, I'm being treated like an employee as an independent contractor and I don't have any expenses and this is great, my take home is really high, but then that means you don't have any write-offs.
Right.
And this is where it comes down to really educating yourself and keeping track of your mileage, for example, making sure, like, as an independent contractor, this is not financial advice by any means, run this by your CPA, but in many cases, every mile you drive to and from your workplace then becomes a write-off for you, whereas as an employee, it is not. So, but there's all of these different things that you can consider as an independent contractor, whereas an employee doesn't necessarily get that benefit. But the contractor also doesn't get the benefit of protection if they get injured in the workplace
R
as well.
Yeah.
I got really, really passionate about this during COVID when we all of a sudden lost our jobs, right? Everything was shut down. And luckily, my employees were covered by unemployment. I felt so grateful that they had coverage. I was not on payroll, so I did not get that coverage until later. I'm so grateful that we did. But there was a big business that was, the owner was very, very outspoken during this time about how the government needs to step up and protect all of these people because he had a ton of independent contractors working for him. And in my opinion, from what I saw and from what I knew some people who worked there, everyone was misclassified there. And I actually got really spicy about it during that time, being like, this is what happens when you misclassify people. Something terrible like this happens, and then they end up kind of screwed. And so that leaned me really far on the hire as W-2s because there's a lot of protection for the employee, even though that it might mean that you pay them a little bit less. Their take home actually might be a little bit more after taxes. It depends on many different factors. But there's a lot of protection in terms of unemployment as well as workman's comp and all of those things. And I would love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that when it comes to what you get as an employee as far as protections and paying into your Social Security and all of that kind of stuff, there's obvious benefit there. But I would probably flip this around a little bit to do the same exact thing that we talked about in the beginning for independent contractors. Like, it's time for some self-reflection and doing your own due diligence around what does it mean to be an independent contractor versus an employee. Because at the same time that I see employers not knowing their stuff and making decisions around independent contractors and employees and the expectations of what that relationship's gonna look like being misconstrued based on what the IRS expects. I see the same thing from the independent contractor and employee side for massage therapist, which is that they might come in to an employee position expecting that they're going to have freedom and be able to close their schedule off and demand this or that, or not have to do things between their sessions and not have to participate in the business in a way an employee is expected to. I see that all the time. It's actually one of the biggest complaints I hear from employers that I work with when I'm helping them with their businesses. The other thing is independent contractors, they don't understand that they are going to need to be a business within the business. Because if you think about it, a lot of independent contractors go that route because they, on paper, make more money,
Mhm.
but they also think they're gonna have freedom and all this stuff, but they don't connect in the puzzle piece that's like, "And I have to do all the work of owning my own business. I just don't have the risk of the bigger business space and bills," right? So I'm like a lower risk business. That's kind of the benefit of independent contractor. The other thing I'll say is, like, independent contractor, it can be less beneficial as from a financial standpoint when you think about taxes and having to pay your own taxes. But depending, again, on your personal tax situation, it could actually work out much better for you. For instance, if you're like a single mom who's considered lower income by tax standards, it may actually benefit you to be in that position versus an employee position financially. So again, I think it comes down to educating yourself, thinking about what you really want and what works for you, and then making that choice based on what that true expectation is. Obviously, with the caveat, and I promise I won't go off on any tangent here, you have to know the employer that you're interviewing with. You have to ask all the right questions because, as we know, there's no standardized way in our profession right now of how people are doing any one of these, employee or contractor. You could go to one business and they're doing contractor this way, and another business and they're doing contractor that way. And it's not any different with employee. Yeah, I've seen employers do all kinds of creative things with employees. So I think that's the other piece of it is like, as a person looking for a position, you need to know what you're looking for and ask the questions ahead of time before you get into a situation that you didn't want to be in? So I think there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, which is probably why this is such a hot topic. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think too, like, I mean, I've seen businesses that offer both. I just saw a business post position that we offer both independent contractor and W-2, and I kind of wanted to just apply and ask questions and see like
Yeah.
how are they doing that and what are the things. And I'm familiar with a business that does employee for a certain amount of hours and then less than a certain amount of hours as independent contractor. There's interesting ways of doing it, not to say that any way is right or wrong.
Right.
I really love the point that you bring up, though, about the business owner, first and foremost, looking at what it is that they want to create and what suits their business the best, as well as the practitioner who's looking for a job, what suits them, and really understanding their financial situation and the flexibility that they need. I was meeting with another massage therapist the other day, and I was kind of joking. I'm like, especially the exceptional practitioners that I've worked with, we're a kooky bunch. And we tend to be a little bit eccentric
Yeah.
and special in our own ways. And having flexibility is something that people who are exceptionally skilled I feel like we're kind of like artists. Right. I don't know if you know many artists, but the
Oh, I
artist
do.
that I know
Yes.
is like you're an interesting person. You have a particular way of being. And I feel like massage therapists are very similar in that
I
regard.
agree.
And in order to employ practitioners, and I was saying this specifically about exceptional practitioners, they got that way because of their eccentricities oftentimes.
Yeah.
And they sometimes need a little bit different of a situation. And it comes down to working with, I mean, obviously the legal requirements, but making sure that everyone is getting their needs met. And this is part of the reason this is the tail end of a several episode series I've been doing on employer and whether or not you're ready to be an employer and things to think about before you hire. And this is an important one too, because I have this really strong belief that if we had more empowered employers creating businesses that are very, very rooted in like what matters to them, then they're going to be able to attract the practitioner that is right for that position. I've seen many, many times where people are just hiring and frankly, the job market is kind of slim pickings right now. A lot of massage schools have closed. There aren't as many massage therapists being produced these days. And it's slim pickings. And I feel like a lot of people hire from desperation and I
Yeah.
think sometimes people throw numbers out there just to try and be attractive as a job offer, or they do things before really thinking about them versus rooting their business strategy or their hiring strategy and the culture that they're creating through a very specific lens of purpose and mission so that people can be really attracted to that position. And I think that what you said about both parties really considering what's important to them, I think that's going to change the game that
Yeah.
really will make a big difference for the opportunities that become available for people.
I could not agree with you more. Like, you're speaking my language because that's actually I rebranded recently to the aligned practice for this very reason. I genuinely feel that when we do business or really anything else from that place, that aligned place, of understanding what our own core values are, understanding what our true needs are, not building something based on what I think a lot of times we end up doing, which is like a little bit fear based, our pricing, things like that, as in particular in the wellness field, tends to be less than it needs to be in all of those kinds of things. So if we don't get aligned before we start making these very important decisions, we end up attracting all kinds of things that don't end up working for us, and burnout is happening at a very high rate in our field because of it. And then I think too, as an employer, we kind of contribute to that burnout city that happens in our world because we are attracting people who aren't the right fit. That's always going to be a conflict and a struggle and cause all kinds of issues. And then both parties get burnt out from that interaction and it just doesn't work. On the flip side, I get it. I talk to a lot of employers all the time, especially right now, like you said, since COVID. It's so hard to find people who even are available to work at all, let alone someone who's aligned? So
Yeah.
it's really, really tough. Probably another topic, whole other topic, but yeah, it is really tough right now, so I can understand if you have come to rely on the people working for you as income to live your life or pay your bills or whatever. It's really hard. It's a hard position to be in to try to wait long enough to find the right person, but in the end, I'm with you. I think you end up actually costing yourself money and energy if you don't do that.
You know that feeling when you have a really great idea for an online course or program, something that could help so many people create passive income and finally free you from the hands on hamster wheel, but you have no idea how to actually build it? Or maybe you've already started building it, but you're stuck. You're second guessing yourself, you don't know if it'll actually work, and honestly, you're not sure you have the time or the money to figure it out. I hear you, and here's what I want you to know. The practitioners inside the Sustainable Bodyworker membership were in that exact same spot. They were stretched thin, managing all the business tasks alone, juggling family and clients and laundry and everything else. They had dreams of building something bigger, but they didn't believe it was possible for them either. And now, they're launching online courses that enroll students before they ever build a single module. They're taking vacations without a financial hit. They're working fewer client days and making more money. They're standing up as leaders in this field and inspiring other body workers to do the same. One of my members, Adrienne, launched her first course while navigating postpartum life with her first baby. She had 13 students sign up for her beta launch, way more than she ever expected. And now she has an online course that sells on autopilot while she's easing back into hands on work on her terms. Another member, Jessica, was working herself into the ground trying to keep her business afloat while caring for aging parents and managing a chronic illness. She joined the membership, implemented the systems, and completely transformed her practice. She now has clients who see her as a professional, who value her work, respect her boundaries, and show up ready to invest. Here's the thing: these members didn't have more time or more money when they started. They had the same fears, the same doubts, the same packed schedules you probably have right now. But what changed wasn't their circumstances, it was the support they received. Inside the Sustainable Bodyworker membership, you get the step by step course creation training that's helped members build their first passive income streams. You get monthly coaching calls where you can get unstuck in real time. You get a hypnotherapy library designed to rewire the limiting beliefs that are keeping you stuck. Because let's be real, information isn't the problem, self sabotage is. And you get a community of body workers who get it, who are building this alongside you, cheering you on and holding you accountable when life gets hard, and collaborating and supporting you when you launch something too. If you're ready to stop watching your kids grow up from the treatment room, if you're ready to build something that gives you time freedom and financial freedom, if you're ready to finally step into the version of your business that actually supports your life, head to the link in the show notes and use the code SBCPOD to get a special discount just for podcast listeners. Because you don't need another certification or modality. You don't need to wait until you're quote unquote ready, whatever that means. You just need someone in your corner who's walked this path and a proven system that actually works for massage therapists juggling all of this. I'll see you inside.
I'll tell this little side story. I actually, when I first started my practice and I hired people pretty immediately and I wasn't ready for that. I'll be very honest about that. There was a lot of work I probably needed to do before I got into that position. So I learned as I went. And the first time I had to fire someone, actually it was probably like the first few times I cried
Oh, it's
in front of
hard.
the people. It's hard, and I just couldn't help myself, like, it was really hard and embarrassing as hell, okay? Because, of course, you don't wanna cry, like, in front of people when you're trying to do something as business owner. But one of the ways that I kind of flipped my mentality on it was I thought about it like this: if I don't let this person go and I see they're not the right fit, I'm actually robbing not only myself of a person who fits better into this position and my clients, someone who fits better for them, but I'm also robbing this person of a opportunity that actually is right for them,
Yeah.
So that kinda helped me get right in my emotional state about moving on from each other, but yeah, it can be really tough as a business owner. You face a lot when you employ other people. It brings a whole new dimension of things to think about and hard stuff to do. Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned something so important, though, and I want to shine a light on it because I think that this is really validating for many people listening is that you made a mistake early on and you learned a lot from it. And I want to just express that that's probably how you ended up here, being able to
Yes.
support other people, right? I made so many mistakes with hiring and growing my business. And, there's that concept of fail forward fast, right? Your failures
Yeah.
really do help you understand things faster, and it's not like definitely not advice to, like, go and make as many mistakes as possible, but go and do the things as intelligently as you can with the information that you have now, and you're gonna make mistakes, and you're gonna learn from them, and ultimately, you might end up in a position where you've learned so much that you've become an incredible employer, or you're able to be in a position like where you are, and you're able to support people in the process of learning how to avoid those mistakes. And then those people are gonna go and make different mistakes and become better for it in their own way, right?
Yep.
So I think that, it's so validating. Part of the reason why I love having these conversations and I love bringing them out publicly is because, you and I in a position of, helping people, like we made mistakes to get here.
So many, so
So
many.
many. And it's hard, but I mean, at the end of the day too, like when it comes to hiring and firing, really it costs so much, not just money, but emotional turmoil to hire the wrong person,
It really
to
does.
hire out of desperation, and I remember a friend that I worked for a little bit, and she hired someone that just was not the right fit, and she was thinking about like, "Oh my gosh, I have to let her go. This is horrible. I'm trying, I'm trying." And I'm just sitting there smiling at her like, "Yep, yep, you gotta do the thing. I don't know how to help you, but you gotta do the thing." And she tried to push it on a little longer, and I'm like, "Girl, you gotta just you know what you need to do."
Yep, it's like I feel like if you hire people, it's inevitable. It's one of those things that's just gonna be the hard thing that you have to do, and it's not ever gonna feel good to most people, I don't think. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uncomfortable news is never easy to deliver. Now, there's one thing that I don't think that we've highlighted enough in this conversation, but it is so important for anyone considering hiring or bringing on someone to take over their space or anything, and that's room renting, right?
Yes.
That's really an option that nobody talks about enough. So, why do you think that that structure gets overlooked, and when might it actually be the cleanest fit?
I think it gets overlooked most often because it's not the most profitable.
Yeah.
I feel like that's where people they just don't see it as being able to make enough money and therefore they put it off the table when they're have that ambition. I think that's true to some extent. I feel like that it's not probably ever gonna be as profitable as having an independent contractor or employee, and typically, it's going to be depending on where you're at, you are more limited to, like, how much you can charge for the space too. I think it's less like pricing, where pricing depends on so many things, how high you can go. You maybe have no limit depending on how you approach it. But I think room rental, you are more limited to certain standards, So,
Yeah.
that's what I think it is, but I do think for a lot of people that I have interacted with, it's probably the best option, and I've definitely worked with people who ultimately chose that option after really considering what they want from their life and their future and how much responsibility they wanna have for other people, and so I think if you really did that work up front, like we've been talking about, you would know probably pretty quickly whether or not that was the best option for you. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a situation that I worked. I think there was a contract, but it worked out more like room renter than anything, and they charged me by the hour that I used the room. So actually, the more successful I became, this is why I ended up finding my own space ultimately. The more
Yeah.
successful I became, the more they earned off of me. And I think it was $20 an hour, and it included sheets, like, it was all itemized, and it was a really great scenario because it was, also a gym, and we were able to refer clients back and forth, and, people who were working out were like, "Oh, there's massage here too," and it was a great little network, and I think that that's a model that is really great for practitioners who are starting out because if you only have 2 clients a week, you don't wanna be spending $500 a month on rent, like, you don't even know if you're gonna make that, but
Right.
then it allows you the room to grow, and ultimately, when you are successful, it's like, wow, that $20 an hour actually adds up to quite a lot of money if with a full practice, but it
Yeah.
gives you that expansion opportunity, and I think that that's something that a lot of people overlook as an option for both the opportunity for increasing the income that they earn off of someone, but without that same ceiling as a set hourly or a set monthly room rental. But I find oftentimes too, like, I agree with you, some of the people that I've consulted with where they've been frustrated that their independent contractor will just go on a 2-week vacation and they don't have to make up hours because they're an independent contractor, and then they're making no money off of them for 2 weeks,
Right.
and then technically can't really fill that space because it's that person's room, and you can't really hire someone temporarily for 2 weeks, that just doesn't make sense. I'm like,
Right.
"Well, you need a room renter because if they go on vacation, they still have to pay rent, and
Yeah.
that's how you get your consistent income."
That's a good point. I love both of those things. That's really cool. I love the hourly room rental idea. I did that a bit as well in a different situation early on, and that was very helpful because it is scary to take on the responsibility of renting a space or renting a whole room when you're first starting. And a lot of times you're working a whole other job to support yourself while you're trying to build. So I really love that idea. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of different ways to do it that don't necessarily encroach on misclassification.
Yeah, and then there's so much less not that I'm pushing anyone one way or another, but I do think if you have a squeamish stomach about any of the possibilities that come with independent contractor or employee, it's a great first step too. It doesn't have to be the only way you ever go. And that's another thing I think that maybe we get a little hung up on in our thinking about which route we're gonna take is, like, then we're trapped in that one route forever. Now we've made that decision and that's what we're doing. And I encourage people to think differently about it. Let's see how it goes with this option, the lowest stakes one first, renting, because 'cause you're not managing the person, but you still have to interact and see how it feels to have someone else in the space. Are they cleaning up after themselves? Are the requirements that you've set out being done? Like, it's a good baby step into what that feels like before you launch into something else if you decide to. That's even another way to approach it. Yeah, so I think that's an excellent option for a lot of people who are feeling a little scared, about
Yeah.
that.
Well, I mean, yeah, an employee, even an independent contractor, is a big commitment, right? Like, at the end of the day, especially for an employee, we are responsible for getting them booked. We are responsible for their paycheck. And I remember I felt so much pressure with my employees. Luckily, I lived right across the street from my clinic. If my employee wasn't booked, I'd come on over and get a massage. Like, I know you're
Amazing.
getting paid and I'm getting body work. It's a win-win
I
situation.
love that.
It's a pressure that I think, some employers don't necessarily take seriously, and then they don't
Yeah,
necessarily understand that there's rumblings, and they don't understand why their employees are looking for employment elsewhere that can book them more regularly, but it is a big responsibility, and I think that, yeah, like you said, taking that pressure off and doing baby steps, we can always graduate people up into, like, after a while, if this works out better as an employee situation and you want more stakes in growing the business and being a part of what I'm growing and the relationship works great, cool. We can always move in that direction. And it's
right.
having something that's not as committal as like a contract or an employment situation can allow you to test the waters and see how the person actually is. Because let's be real, people are very much on their best behavior in the first 90 days anyway.
Absolutely.
And people will surprise you. And being able to test the waters, especially if you are just starting out, maybe you end up deciding, like, no, I actually really don't like interacting with people that are not my clients. I don't like that responsibility. I don't like someone else in my space or whatever it is. You can take that baby step and there's no skin off your back, right? There's no one saying that you
Yeah,
failed. There's no one saying, like, you just learn from this
right,
scenario. And then you get to make the next step saying, okay, well, I would like my income to increase, but I don't like sharing my room. What's the next option for me? And I
right.
love that in this day and age, there are tons of options beyond being an employer for scaling your business.
Yes, I agree. Totally. Yeah, 100% aligned.
Now, you shared a story in the blog post that you shared about an arrangement that you genuinely believed was set up correctly and you still ended up with a bill in the mail. I would
Yep.
love for you to share with our listeners what that experience taught you about the real risk that there is here.
Yeah, so I did a lot of due diligence before I went the employee and independent contractor route. I won't say before. Actually, yes, I started it with renters. I added independent contractors later. So speaking from experience, it is a nice baby step to know how you're gonna feel about that. And so I actually had all at the time. I had all three going on. I had renters, I had independent contractors and employees at this time. I had someone who was, classified as an independent contractor, and it was very real, like, she really wanted to have her freedom, she liked to close her schedule off whenever, and, it just was the best case scenario for her. I was very clear by that point, this was a few years into me owning my business, so I had been doing this a while, in the interview around what independent contractor was, what the expectations were, what I was gonna provide, all of that kinda stuff. And anyway, there were some problems within the personnel, and her behavior just became unacceptable, and I ended up having to cut our contract, like, and that it was in the contract that any time we could be finished, right, if there was an issue. So, I let her go, and she filed for unemployment.
Mm,
Um, so it wasn't even that she necessarily put any kind of complaint against my business or anything like that, but here in Oregon, where my business was also located, the way that they do unemployment, it kind of calculates based on your past several years of employment.
yeah.
And if you didn't work at a place long enough, then it also pulls in the last employment and the last employment before that. It's an interesting way of get things the way things happen. But she had only worked for me for a short amount of time, and luckily, I think, because I ended up getting a bill in the mail for her unemployment wages, which was, I think, around I wanna say it was less than $500, can't remember the exact amount, and I tried to fight it because no one had ever contacted me saying this person was misclassified, what give your side, anything like that, and I there was no way to do that. There was no, like, appeal process or anyone that you could talk to or anything along those lines, or at least nothing that I could find, and I tried, trust me. Outside of getting an attorney, it felt like at that point, I felt like I just had to pay it, you know? So, I didn't get just for people listening out there, because I think one of the big fears is you're gonna be shut down or fined and all this
Yeah.
kinda stuff, and that could happen. I am not downplaying that. Again, not legal advice here at all, but that is the extent of what happened, is that I owed this money, and I ended up because it was such a low amount, I just was like, "Not worth it, me finding an attorney, I'm just gonna pay it," and, that was the end of it. I paid it, and that was the end of the whole ordeal. So, I guess what's the takeaway for people is that, even when you do it feel like you do it all right, there's a possibility that it goes wrong.
Yeah.
And what do you do about that? It could have been much worse for me. I could have ended up with thousands of dollars in what I owed, and I would have had to get an attorney. And that maybe I would be telling a very different story now. I don't know. But in the end, I had the easy route, which was just paying it and moving on. I think in the end it really is like you could do it all right and it could still go wrong, and you just have to do your best, at making sure you know what all the possible outcomes are and being comfortable with those, which is something I've often said in many of the types of things that I teach like this, is like when there's a gray area and not a clear path forward with some things, which happens I think a lot in our profession with different things like insurance billing and hiring and things like that. It's like you need to know what the possible outcomes are and just understand that one of those could come your way, and are you comfortable with that? Is that something that you're willing to deal with? If not, then maybe take the more straightforward route.
Hey, friend, quick pause in the episode because I have to share something that's made a huge impact on both my practice and the work I teach inside my courses. Now, if you've been following me for a while, you probably remember the teal cups I started out with. Those were iconic in my early days of teaching cupping therapy. But here's the thing I learned the hard way: not all silicone cups are created equal. I started noticing huge inconsistencies between sets: cups that discolored fast, sharp edges that irritated my client's skin, and it just wasn't cutting it for the level of work I was doing. And in 2020, I found Global Cupping, and I've never looked back. Their cups are hands down the clearest, smoothest, and most consistent silicone cups I've ever used, and I've tried a ton. The difference in quality is immediately noticeable. These cups stay clear even after repeated disinfection, and they're built to stand up to high-level sanitation protocols, something I insist on teaching in my neuromuscular cupping therapy trainings. What I also love is the customizability. I can mix and match sizes in a set, no more stockpiling a bunch of cups I never use, and their silicone facial cups are my absolute go-to now for jaw work. No more rubber bulbs on the glass cups to worry about disintegrating, just easy to clean, durable tools that are comfortable for both the client and the therapist. In my own approach, I combine cupping with movement, massage, and retraining at the neuromuscular junction. And that means I need cups that can move with the body, grip well, and feel safe and smooth on sensitive tissue. These silicone cups, especially the 55 hardness to start with, are perfect for that. And for chronic pain clients, especially those with nervous system dysregulation, the ability to glide, pause, and work in dynamic ways is key to breaking pain cycles. Plus, their customer service, impeccable. I'm a stickler for this. I've had questions, students have had questions, and they're always quick, professional, and just genuinely kind. It makes a really big difference. So whether you're brand new to cupping or you're refining your technique, this is the gear I recommend. It's an investment in your practice that pays off in results, ease of use, and your client's comfort. Use code NEURO at checkout for 20% off your first order at globalcupping.com. All right, let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, that's probably the best I can give on that one, but in the end, like a lot of things, I think we go to worst case scenarios, which is like I'm gonna get shut down and my license is gonna get taken away and I'm gonna get fined millions of dollars. In my experience as a business owner, with things like insurance billing and taxes and hiring and all those hard topics where we get those fears in our minds, it's very rarely the worst case scenario. It's usually much less than you think it'll be, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well, it's
considering
usually the people who are considering the risks and doing their best to set themselves up right that end up with the not worst case scenario,
You're
right?
right. That's a good point. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. I think that's a really good point is doing your due diligence does ensure or give you a better chance at least of having a better case scenario.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, having employment attorneys and all of that, like, that's not the cheapest thing in the world. But I think one thing that I want to circle back to that you mentioned earlier, that there are free resources. The Small Business Administration,
Yeah.
oftentimes your local library will have resources for small business owners as well. Take advantage of those and get someone's eyes on your stuff. I tell you what, lawyers need body work. One of my clients who is a lawyer, luckily, I was dealing with a mold issue in my clinic. This was before COVID. We had such a crazy shutdown experience. Even before COVID, I always joked that we were prepared for COVID because we had done it before and we can do it again. But I was dealing with a mold issue and was in the process of suing my landlord. And I had no money for the lawyer, but I was like, "Wait, one of my clients is a lawyer and she loves body work. So would she like to trade?" And she was more than happy to do that. So
Amazing.
be resourceful.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, the most successful business owners are simply the most resourceful ones. Don't ever take no for an answer. Don't, especially the ones that are coming from inside your head or from someone else who's never done the thing that you're trying to do. And just find out as many answers as you can. Do it the best that you know how. It's the people who turn a blind eye and say, "Oh, I do it this way and it's always worked out for me and I don't need to look at what these, regulations are." Those are the sketchy situations that I don't necessarily think are always looking out for the best interests of the practitioners and the business as a whole. And really just do your due diligence. There's a lot of information out there that can be really helpful. And at the end of the day too, I really do think that the document that, and I'll link this too in the show notes as well, that the IRS provides does make it pretty clear for a lot of employers in this scenario on, if you've already set it up and you know what you want to do, you generally fall into one or two categories.
Yeah.
And just erring on the side of, okay, I lean on that side. And if you do lean on the employee side and you've been wanting to do ICs in order to save taxes, just bite the bullet and pay the taxes and give the benefits and grow your team.
Right.
And because if that's really what you want to do, then it's kind of like, well, I want to learn how to ride a bike, but I don't want to fall down. Well, if you want to learn, you're going to have to be okay with falling every once in a while, right?
Right.
There's certain things that you have to accept as part of the reality of a scenario. And I think that that's just one of those things.
I love all of that. I totally agree. Yeah. I think it is about being very prepared for everything, like, having all of the information, really understanding it, and making your choices from there. Like you said, it's not you're not ever going to be perfect, and you probably are gonna make mistakes, but that is what it is. The other thing I wanna underline that you said is the resourcefulness. That's so true. Every business owner that I know who's made it a decade or more, is because they're scrappy, they don't they're like, "Okay, that didn't work. I'm gonna go over here. I'm gonna go over here. Can I do a trade?" Dun, 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 and you have to be, I feel like, because you're gonna run up on things that even money can't solve sometimes, It's like it's all about how creative you can get. So, I think that's key, and it can feel hard sometimes when you're the service provider, you're doing all the business stuff and all of that kinda thing to have that kind of energy, but you just build it in there, keep flexing that muscle, it'll get better over time. Yeah.
100%. I love this conversation. It's so important. And I really appreciate too that we're able to have this conversation about like, well, there's this one way of doing it and there's that one way of doing it. And here's how we make it work. Whereas the conversations on the forums are straight up just accusing people oftentimes of like, doing it wrong and taking advantage of people. And while there are probably people out there that are knowledgeably taking advantage of people, there's always
Right.
gonna be, the evil people out there, unfortunately, but I think that the vast majority of the people who are on the forums seeking advice, asking these questions, are trying to do their best, as same as the people who are answering the questions, right? We're all trying to do our best. And circling back to, if we all create the spaces that serve our greater purpose and call in those employees that will help us do that, it's going to be a much better future for the world of massage therapy. And I'm really excited about what that looks like with more people listening to this conversation.
Me too. Extremely. Yes.
As we wrap up, Julie, I want to see, is there anything else that you would like to leave our listeners with other than the offerings that you have? I'll have you share that in a second. But is there any like last words of wisdom or anything like that that you would really like to share with the world right now?
I think I would piggyback a little bit on the future conversations around this, especially for people who are listening who may have seen some of these conversations take place or have been involved in them. I think we have a tendency to absorb a lot of information that we hear and just jump on it when we see it without really thinking it through about, like, what could have gone into a question that someone's asking in a forum or a job that someone's posted. And instead of getting upset and accusing in those situations, like that somebody's definitely getting taken advantage of, or that an employer's job post, oh, they shouldn't be saying they're having an independent contractor, it has to be employee. Getting curious instead, asking more questions, maybe taking the opportunity to educate yourself on what does the IRS actually say about this? What are the things that should be in consideration around massage therapy or body work and independent contractor employer? What questions could I ask this employer to find out more information if I want to give my opinion back versus just giving the same thing that we keep saying on repeat? Because it is extremely hard now for people to have those conversations in the forums without them being afraid. I have employers and people looking for jobs who have privately reached out to me when they've gotten caught up in these types of conversations, freaked out, feeling like they're going to get canceled, they've done something wrong, afraid to ask those questions publicly. And that doesn't really serve any of us. None of us are going to learn from each other in this situation, and it's not going to improve when we cannot have constructive conversations about it. So that's probably my biggest thing is I really believe that if we can start having better conversations around this, it's going to improve for everyone. And I would love to see that. Like you said, I can't wait to see the future because I think now these conversations starting here, hopefully that spills out into the world and we find a better way forward.
Oh, so much love to all of that. I love that so much. Thank you. Now, anyone who's interested in receiving support from you, where would you like to direct them? What offerings do you have going on right now?
Yeah, so I offer some online classes and free downloads and things like that. So those are all on my website, alignedpractice.io. And I also do one-on-one coaching. I do a limited amount of that I usually take a new client every quarter. So that's like a high touch coaching program where I'm like a background business partner doing things like optimizing the website and Google business listing and things like that. And if anyone's interested in that type of program, you can always reach out to me at massagebusinesscoach@gmail.com.
Amazing. And we will link your website and your Instagram in the show notes as well. Julie, I just want to thank you so much for this conversation. It's so important. And I'm just so grateful to have connected with you.
Me too. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. I appreciate it.
Yay. Thanks for listening to The Sustainable Body Worker. If something resonated for you today, grab your free breakthrough session, which includes a custom hypnotherapy track to help you unlock the next level. Grab it now with the link in the show notes. And to hear more, hit subscribe. We'll see you next time.